All right, all right. The stream should be up and running smoothly. If somebody can let me know if the volume is coming through smoothly. I was rewatching the last stream I did, and I noticed that the volume was slightly choppy. It wasn't totally coming through clear, so I don't know why there was an issue on that. Like, say for instance, like just before I did that live stream, I was on another panel. I was on the Machine Lies channel, and there was nothing wrong with my mic volume. So I don't know what was up with that. Maybe it's a one-off thing, but that was weird. Yo, how you doing, Jared Genesis? How you doing, my friend? You said earlier stream today. Yeah, yeah. Yeah. Typically, I do my live streams at like what 11:30, 12 a.m. something like that. Every once in a while, I get the opportunity to do a stream earlier in the night. I should say, like in the relatively early evening. So whenever I get the opportunity to do so, I do it. But anyway, I wanted to start off this stream with responding to a comment that was left recently by an individual named Eddie. Now I know Eddie. I've talked to this guy. He's one of the people that also goes after this knucklehead, Perry Green, right? But anyway, Eddie left a comment and asked, said, "Hey, I have a question for you, ETT. Why don't you have a list of sins on like a clipboard, and then you can show Perry the list and ask them, do you do any of these things? And if he says yes, then you can say, well, you commit sin." So initially, what he's saying is, well, look, what you should do is get like a clipboard or some notebook and write down like certain sins in it, and then ask Perry, if he does these things, and if he does, well, that proves he sins. So then I responded to Eddie, and I said, I'll read the direct quote from the comment. I said, no need to do that. When I had my multiple discussions with him over the years, I asked him, do you do this sin or do that sin? He says, yes, but it is not a sin for me. So that will get us nowhere. Then I know a book, chapter, and verse. If he goes against any of the verses, he is sinning. No need to give him a special treatment. That I put up 1 John 3:4. For sin is the transgression of God's law. If Perry is smoking on stream, says it's all right to commit adultery, says robbery is not a sin, well, it's clear he's a liar and a sinner. No reason to make a list. That's a waste of time. Right, and that's really what it is, right? Really what it is having these discussions with people like Perry Green or these free gracers. It's really a waste of time. Now, when I do these conversations, I'm not trying to change my opponent's mind and view. Like, hey, look, I already know going into it, I'm not going to change Perry Green's mind. He's going to believe he, never sins, until the day he dies. He's going to believe that he's saved forever because of sweet Jesus. And, he does nothing wrong. I'm never going to change his mind, and I don't intend on changing his mind. I'm also never going to change the free gracer's mind. They're going to believe in this white baby, sweet Jesus until the day they die, and it's not of their own works. They just got to believe, and well, that's it. So guess what I'm trying to do though? When I have these discussions with these individuals, I'm trying to show evidence for the listening audience that these people don't know what they're talking about. All right. So, hey, look, it might be too late for some of these individuals that we talk to, like Perry Green or the Layman Seminary and the scoundrels that are around his YouTube channel. It might be too late for those individuals to receive the truth. But guess what? For the listening audience who listens to the conversation, it's not too late for them. A lot of those people might be open and willing to hear both sides of conversation. They might be able to reason with themselves. Oh, okay, well, yeah, this guy has a lot of good points, against what these guys are saying. Like, I'll give an example. Like, a couple months ago, I had a dude call into my live stream. His name was Drew, and it was telling me, well, yeah, I used to be a free gracer. I used to be a believer in that free grace, but I watched some of your debates that you've had with these three graces, and I realized, yeah, you know what, the three grace position really isn't lining up with the Bible. To believe that, you just got to believe in sweet Jesus, and nothing you do matters anymore. It's like, yeah, I used to believe that, but after listening to your discussions and debates, I found out that's not true. So he's a good example to use as somebody who used to believe in these things, but after listening to multiple debates and discussions, changed his mind, right? So take that to note. When I do debates with some of these individuals, I'm not really looking to change their mind, because I'm already aware that like 90% of the time, their mind is completely fixed, and they're really unwilling to waver on what they believe and teach. And that's okay. That's okay. That there always has to be, some people in the world who are fixed in their ways. Hey, the Bible says the wicked go astray from the womb. So Perry Green, he was wicked when he came out of the womb. He was wicked from his own birth. So having a 2-hour discussion with him is not going to change his life around. It might make him look like an idiot for the listening audience, and might persuade them, okay, well, yeah, I shouldn't go believe in antinomianism, or I shouldn't go believe in a free gracism. And that's the goal of having these discussions, not to change my opponent's mind, but for the audience to be educated as to why the opponent's view is incorrect. That's what I aim for when I do these debates and discussions. So let's hit some comments here. Let's see what's going on. Hey, how you doing, John? He said the audio sounds good. Okay, that's good to hear. He said Shalom. Let's see. Foothills Runner said Shalom to ETT, the undisputed champ. I'm doing all right, my friend. Hope you're doing well as well. I see it's time to wake up is here. How you doing, my friend? We have Luke from Australia. How are you doing, Luke? Hope you're doing all right over there. Let's see. Time to wake up said everybody sins even after they are saved. The difference is people who realize it and continue to make amends and continue to strive to do better. Right, right. And that's the point of disagreement and contention with some of these people. Like I even got into a debate about this yesterday on the Machine Lives channel. The guy was really like confused with what he was talking about, so it's hard to understand what he's saying. But he was getting confused about me talking about how there's clearly a difference between people who live an active lifestyle of sin versus people who are, trying to live righteously. There's clearly a complete difference between these groups of people, right? People who live after Christ, right? Walk how Christ walked, live by the laws in the Bible. And people who just sit there and say, oh, yeah, I believe in Jesus. And then if you look at their lifestyle, there's nothing Christ-like about them. Like, a lot of these people go into these churches out here. There's nothing Christ-like about them. They just go to church like one day out of the week, or some of them 2 days out of the week. But then if you look at how they live, like only, any other random day of the week, it doesn't represent Christ. The word Christian means to be Christ-like, right? So if somebody looks at how you live, right, to look at your life and the way that you're living, they're supposed to see a Christ through you. They're supposed to see you walking how Christ walked. So most people out here don't represent Christ. Like, I'll give you an example. Like, just one time, going back to like 2018 or something, I was with some Christians, right? We had to go to some event. So I was in the car with like 6 other Christians going somewhere. And they came to this intersection where there was this dude, that was asking for money on the side of the street, like this homeless dude, and all these Christians, all they could do is, look the other way and pretend that they don't see the guy, right? You see the guy's sign there, right, asking for, for help, right? Anything helps. The only one willing to help him out was me, but nobody else wanted to give this guy anything. It's like, well, what? Like what would Christ do? what would Christ do? Like, aren't you guys supposed to be representing Christ? And none of you wanted to help out this dude who's clearly in need. Like, that's not very Christ-like of you. You know what I'm saying? So the truth is, a lot of people out here are just phonies, right? Phony balonies is what a lot of these individuals and teachers on YouTube are. It's really becoming clear to see, right? It's really becoming very clear to see, who's telling the truth and who's telling a lie. Like, hey, look, if you're living in the year 2026 and you honestly believe that Perry Green, the preacher, is telling you the truth, I mean, you're just brainwashed. Like, I'm sorry. But, if you can sit there and believe what that idiot's telling you, oh, just believe, nothing's a sin for you anymore. It's really ridiculous that people like that have dedicated fans and followers. Like, shit, you look at this dude's stream that he does, he literally has people, traveling from around the world to come meet him in his living room to do live streams with him. It's like, wow, you'd think some people could be, smarter than this to follow these, dumb deceivers. Or I'll give another example. What about this guy, Jack Smack 77? I call him Jack Ass, right? He's Jack the Ass. And, you look at this dude's page, like literally, dude has 1,000 videos of, dogging on anybody who dares to say a single word against the gospel of free grace. Like literally every single video this guy does, he just like takes an image of whatever person he's talking about, do like a YTP thumbnail of it, right? Put, devil ears on them, it's not out the nose, put them in flames in the background, and call it, oh, well, this person's going to hell, right? They're absolutely going to hell. You know what I'm saying? It's absolutely hilarious. Absolutely hilarious. But you know what I find funny, though? You know what I find funny? Is I've offered to debate that individual literally multiple times. I said, hey, look, I'll even give you a handicap. I'll even give you a handicap, jackass. We can go to friendly territory for you. We don't have to do it on my channel. We don't got to do it on your channel. We could go to your friend, Praise the I Am. Look him up. Another popular free grace preacher. And we can do the discussion on his channel, right? I'll go to friendly territory. Shit, I'll take the whole panel at one time. I don't care. Right? Just you show up, Jack Smack, and he don't want to do it. The dude's, running like a chicken shit coward. It's like, really? I mean, this is pathetic. A boomer like yourself in your late 60s is afraid to have a conversation with somebody in their 20s. I mean, this is really pathetic and sad. This is really pathetic and sad. So again, he doesn't want to talk to me, but he will do 2 videos about me, though. Right? Like, does anybody else just find that funny and laughable? It's like, come on. But the dummy is on there like, hey, look, just believe in Jesus and it's free grace forever, right? It's all just free grace forever. Just free grace forever. Let's see. He said, send me a link, please. I'll consider bringing you up, but what is your question or topic of discussion, right? What is the topic of discussion? And maybe I will consider bringing you up here. This brother said, it's like all the Christians who voted and still support Trump. I tried so hard to tell them that the lesser of 2 evils is still evil. Some channels block me. I mean, shit, try to go tell that to this knucklehead Jill, right? Rebuke and Reprove is his YouTube channel if people want to look that knucklehead up. But Jill's like, literally, this is what he said. This is what this novice literally said. I asked him, well, what is your faults about, Trump's war in the Middle East now? And this knucklehead literally said, oh, well, what's a righteous war, right? It is a holy war that is going on there, right? It is a holy war that Trump has unleashed on that territory. It's like, wow, really? I mean, well, if you weren't paying attention to world news before that, I mean, Iran wasn't attacking anybody. Well, I mean, months and months and months ago, there was a conflict between them and Israel, but they agreed to a ceasefire, right? So then they were just basically dwelling peacefully next to each other without any rockets going back and forth, right? The fighting didn't start up again until America, um, launched the operation on Iran. And then they, fight back in defense of themselves, which makes total sense. But people like Jill, oh, whatever, man. Trump's, a godsend, right? He's a savior. You know what I'm saying? It's just absolutely hilarious and ridiculous, what some of these dumb people believe. Again, you just can't change their mind. Some people are just so lost in the sauce and so brainwashed that, you can't really change what they believe. And hey, he wants to sit there and believe that, Trump's like some savior, some God sent that's, bringing salvation upon everybody and ending the hard times, right? Bringing financial peace. It's like, well, shit, that ain't happening anytime soon. I can't even tell you the amount of people I see out here that are, struggling, behind on bills. Like shit, go and look on TikTok, right? What isn't there like a million videos of people on there whining about their financial circumstances? It's a lot of them are pointing at Trump, saying, "Hey, look, it was bad under Biden too, excuse me, but it wasn't as bad as under Trump." What about people talking about how they're getting their SNAP benefits reducted? So think about that. So the government doesn't want to give people their SNAP cards to feed their family, but there is, $1 trillion to go fight a war in the Middle East, though. Right, there is, half of $1 trillion to keep sending armory and weapons to Ukraine, though, to fight the Russians. There is money for all of that stuff, but there is not enough money to give American citizens SNAP benefits to feed their families. Let that sink in, and that is under this dictator Donald Trump. So remember that, Mr. Jill. Before you sit there, and act like you're like on some type of level that you know something. Everybody can see through Jill. Jill is basically a paper tiger, is what Jill is, right? Jill is a paper tiger. Look that term up if you don't know what that means. The dude's a complete novice. It's truly ridiculous and laughable. You see real quick. Yeah, I get what you're saying. I get what you're saying. A lot of people are just, ignorant to the facts and the history, right? A lot of people don't like to look into that, stuff. Like, I'll give you a perfect example. Like, a lot of dummies will sit there and say, well, they're totally clueless as to why Russia's attacking Ukraine. It's like, well, if you knew any type of history, well, you would know that they actually were part of the Soviet Union, like 30, 40 years ago, right? So Russia's trying to take back some of that territory that was once under, control, right? And they also wanted, as like a zone that between itself and the NATO countries, right? But again, a lot of these dumb idiots online don't know anything, right? Um, they just see like 4 years ago with when this conflict started, they'll be like, oh, it's all terrible. I have no idea why this is happening. It's like, well, maybe if you actually sat down for 10 minutes and did any research, you might know why this is happening. And then let's talk about this Joker Trump. Anybody remember this knucklehead saying, oh, well, when I get in office, I'm going to, end that conflict with one phone call. I'm going to end it in one day, right? On my first day in the White House, I'm going to, end the conflict in Ukraine. Here we are, 1,000+ days later, and of course that didn't happen. Which obviously any person who has any brain cell in their head could tell, okay, well, yeah, obviously this knucklehead's not going to be able to end a whole conflict with one phone call. You know what I'm saying? But there were dumb people who believed that dumb shit. You know what I'm saying? Like, it's hilarious and retarded. Hilarious and retarded. Let's see. George Carlin, yeah, I know who you're talking about. They did a video about him on ERB, where look that up on YouTube. You might enjoy that. So let me see here. If there are any questions or comments, I will address those. If anybody got anything. Let me see real quick. Yeah, so something I want to touch on is that, well, usually talk about this type of stuff, but it's always good to retouch back on it, is about Christ not doing away with the law. Because I just find it weird to me, like everywhere you look, there's these people who constantly bring this notion that Christ did away with the law when he died on the cross. Like I was watching a discussion that Tazariak had the other day with some like Christian pastor who was on a clubhouse stream that he was on. And the Christian pastor was like, look, well, Jesus, when he died, he did away with all the law, so we today, we don't have to live in accordance with that. We just got to live by what Christ said. It's like, okay, well, let's go by what you're saying for a second. Is it true or false that Christ said, because remember, your position is that you just got to live by what Christ said, not the law. Well, is it true or false that Christ said that you're supposed to keep the law? Like, I'll give you an example, like John 14:15. It says, if you love me, keep the commandments. I'll give you a bonus example with that woman that was found in adultery in John the 8th chapter. What did Christ tell her when he found out? Christ told her, go and don't sin anymore. He literally told her to go keep the law. Anybody who has any biblical knowledge, well, you would know, according to 1 John chapter 3, verse 4, that sin is the transgression of God's law. So by Christ telling anybody to go and stop sinning, well, he's telling them to go keep God's law. And then, of course, Matthew 5:17-19, Christ said, I didn't come to do away with any of the Old Testament laws. And then he said, anybody who teaches men to break them will be the least in the kingdom, but anybody who teaches to keep them will be great in God's kingdom. So I ask again, for any person who claims to have any spiritual or scriptural knowledge at all, how can anybody hold the notion that that the law was done away, or that Christ did away with the law? I got another verse to throw up here. Bear with me one second. This is in the book of Ecclesiastes, chapter 12, and verse 13 and 14. It says, let us hear the conclusion of the whole matter. Fear God and keep his commandments, for this is the whole duty of man. For God shall bring every work into judgment, with every secret thing, whether it be good or whether it be evil. Whoa, hold up a second. Let's read this again. Right, let's put our listening caps on for a second. It's Ecclesiastes chapter 12, verse 13 and 14. It says, let us hear the conclusion of the whole matter. Fear God and keep his commandments, for this is the whole duty of man. For God shall bring every work into judgment, with every secret thing, whether it be good or whether it be evil. Hey, there's a lot of meat on that bone right there. Right, there's a whole lot of meat right there that we just read. For one, that clearly proves that God's will for man is to live in accordance with his law. Now, first of all, hold up a second. Is it true or false that Christ said that he came to do the will of his Father? Like, does anybody recall in was that Luke, the second chapter, right when Christ stayed behind in Jerusalem and was talking with the priest and doctors and wise men. Then his mother and father turned back when they went a day's journey, and they noticed Christ wasn't with them. So they turned back to Jerusalem to find Christ. And when they found Christ, he said to them, why is it that you're looking for me? Do you not know that I have to be about my Father's business? Is that not what Christ said in Luke, the second chapter? So what's God's business? Well, it says here that according to God, his will is for man to keep the commandments, to keep his law. So, well, how could any sane person argue that Christ didn't tell us to keep the law if Christ just said that he came to do the Father's will? I mean, that right there, that's a knockout right there. That's a spiritual KO. Now, let's look at verse 14. Let's look very closely here for these, free gracers and, antinomians and people who think that they're just saved because they just say Jesus one day and, saved forever. It says, for God shall bring every work into judgment with every secret thing, whether it be good or whether it be evil. That right there completely shuts these guys down. Completely shuts these guys down. God's going to bring every work into judgment, whether it be good or whether it be evil. Well, hold up. I thought that these guys say that as long as you believe in Jesus, you're not judged anymore, right? Because God just sees Jesus. So he don't look at any of your works anymore. Doesn't look at your actions anymore because it's all just, Jesus. I mean, that's clearly not what the Bible says. That's clearly not what the Bible says. In fact, let me pull up a bonus verse to go along with this. And then I'll hit the comments if there's people who have a question or comment. Just bear with me. Okay, so I'm going to go to 2 Corinthians chapter 5, and we'll grab verse 10. It says, for we must all appear before the judgment seat of Christ, that everyone may receive the things done in his body according to that which he has done, whether it be good or whether it be bad. Wait, so let's swallow that real quick. Let's take that into consideration and understand what it's saying. It's saying that all of us are going to have to stand before Christ on Judgment Day. We're going to have to be judged according to the things we've done, whether they are good or whether they be bad. So, doesn't this completely slam dunk the doctrine of free grace and antinomianism that these ignorant people believe? The fact that we all are going to be judged for the things we've done, whether they're good or bad. I thought that these guys say that as long as you believe, right, there's no sin for you anymore, right? Now nothing you do is bad, right? Remember Perry's lines, right? His famous words. Well, it's not sin for me. I mean, this knucklehead is so serious with the shit he says. Dude's literally selling underwear that says it's not a sin for me, and shower curtains that says it's not a sin for me. I mean, I'm being dead serious when I say that. I'm not even being sarcastic. This dude's literally selling merchandise. Well, first of all, the dude's like main products are a T-shirt that has the Pornhub logo that just says the word Bible. And the dude's like selling the shit, he'll give it away for free to his audience. I mean, wow, this is crazy. And then I saw a picture that Nick put up from one of Perry's around the country tour that he went on. And one of these Satanists that he took with him on his trip is throwing up the devil horns. It's like, wow, I mean, these are really the people who are going around teaching the Bible today. It really is just strange. It really is just bizarre and strange to me. It just honestly is. Okay, let me see. Jared Genesis asked, so now Mike is saying we don't have to keep the law now? Well, yeah, you know what, Mike, which he's talking about my discussion I did yesterday with Mike. And if anybody don't know what I'm talking about, that's the son of Pops, or as we call him, Poops, right? Anybody might remember back from the Mind of Shrek days, right, when Shrek was coming around here. We had a few conversations with this old dude named Pops, right? We call him Poops, and his son Mike. We found out that these dudes are, completely, don't know what the hell they're talking about. I mean, Pops isn't terrible with what he's saying, but he still doesn't know what the hell he's talking about either. But his son Mike is completely just wild and way out there with the bullshit he believes and says. Right? Like now his whole thing that he's been saying for the last like 3 years is that the Old Testament God is actually the devil, but then Christ is actually the real God of the Bible. But the Old Testament God, that's actually Satan there. It's like, okay, well, I completely, absolutely roasted this dude. I absolutely mopped the floor with this clown yesterday. And I asked him, which, it's hard to get any word in with this individual because the dude's running his mouth a mile a minute, can't even have the decency of listening to any other person on the panel because he just likes to hear himself talk, apparently. But I completely roasted this dude. I asked him, well, hold up a second. Let me refute your whole 10-minute rambling in like 15 seconds here. You say the Old Testament God is the devil. Um, so that means by his reasoning, he even agreed that that means Satan gave the law, right? And Exodus, the 20th chapter, when God gave Moses the law, the 10 commandments, he said that was Satan who gave those laws, which is absolutely ridiculous and dumb off the start. But then second of all, here was the knockout. I completely roasted this dude. I asked him, okay, well, so if you're saying that Satan gave the law, well, why is Christ telling us to live by the law then? Right? Why is Christ, I gave verses on that earlier in this stream, well, if Satan gave the law, well, then why the hell did Christ tell us to live by the law then? Shouldn't he be condemning that? Shouldn't he be condemning the law? Not endorsing it, not teaching us to live in accordance with it? You know what I'm saying? Like, I just honestly don't get this. And then second of all, let's even look deeper into it. Let's do a deep dive inside joke. As I said, my slogan over here is Challenger Deep, right? That's the level I go to over on this channel. Right? I'm Challenger Deep. These guys are like kiddie pool deep. Right? These guys are stuck in the shallow end of the water. I'm over here, Mariana Trench, Challenger Deep with the information I provide on my streams. And that's just how it goes. But let's look at this, right? Let's completely annihilate this fool. So you're saying that Satan gave the law to mankind in Exodus 20. Well, hold up a second. If you look at the law, you're saying that Satan is telling people to love one another, to do kind to your neighbor, to not steal, to not murder, to not lay with the opposite gender, to not get tattoos on your body, to not sacrifice humans, and hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of other laws that are in there. So you're saying, by let's get this straight. You need to be honest with the dumb shit that you are saying, because you're being proven to be a liar, Mike. Right? With this guy, I believe this dude used to be named like the White Rabbit or something like that, or the Gray Rabbit, some dumb shit like that. But you are being proven to be a novice and a liar. So how can you say that Satan gave man the law if the law is a good thing, right? Like it says, don't murder other people, don't steal from other people, don't lay with other men's wives, right? Don't worship false idols. How the hell was that from Satan? Like what about that? What? Like if it was from Satan, like shouldn't it be like something evil? Like if I'm not mistaken, with these like Satanist, devil worshippers, like all day, sacrificing humans and drinking blood and put the cross upside down, right, worshiping all these types of demonic demons and idols and shit. So how the hell can you say that Satan gave the law in Exodus 20? I mean, hey, look, the dude's just showing that he is a complete novice and has no knowledge of anything. And then I'm gonna absolutely put this dude 6 feet under here. Or I'm gonna make him code blue, make him knocked out on the floor with what I'm about to give here. All right, this is the nail in his coffin right here. This is the nail in his coffin. This is my mic drop moment on this individual. How can you say that the Old Testament God is the devil if in Job, the 2nd chapter, you can see God and Satan having a conversation with each other? So how can the Old Testament God be Satan if the God of the Old Testament had a conversation with Satan, an interaction with Satan? So doesn't that prove that they're not the same character? Because he'll try to say, well, when it says God here or there, well, that's actually, Satan making himself appear as God. It's like, no, you're just a complete novice to say something like that. It says in Job 2 that there was a day when the sons of God presented themselves before the Lord, and Satan came amongst them. And if you read it, God and Satan engaged in a conversation. So how the hell could the Old Testament God be Satan if God and Satan are seen having a conversation with each other? And second of all, it says that this is happening up in heaven where God is. So how is this happening if Satan was cast to the earth, according to his view, or the mainstream Christian view about Satan and angels rebelling against God at the beginning and they got banned from heaven to the earth? Which I don't hold to that, but this is a good indicator that story is not true because we see Satan up in heaven talking to God here. So that's a cut. That's a deep cut right there. Okay, so I'm going to hit some more comments here. Please do excuse me if I skip a few of them. I'll try to hit all of them I can, but I can't always get all of them, so my apology in advance. Lionheart said, good evening. End time teacher, keep up the good work, bro. Yeah, how you doing, Lionheart? Hope you're doing well. His brother said, Christ flipped over the money changer's table and chased him out with a whip. Yeah, good point. And it's funny because people pretend that Jesus was like some, kind, warm-hearted figure that, wouldn't hurt a fly. It's like, well, that's not true. I mean, Christ clearly made a whip and chased people out of the temple. He flipped tables over. Hey, that's bad temper right there. And of course, there was a reason why he did it. He didn't just act out. He did that for a reason because they were making the temple of God, or the place you come and worship God. They made it into an exchange for liars, right? They were being deceitful with the people they were trading money and goods with, right? So Christ acted out, right? He got mad. But wait a second, if Christ got mad, doesn't that show that he's not about all peaches and cream and rainbows and unicorns and hugs and kisses, like the Christian church say? Like seriously, like doesn't that prove that? And then what about Matthew the 10th chapter, right? Matthew chapter 10, I believe was that verse 35? Christ said, I didn't come to bring peace upon the earth. I came to bring division. Right, so Christ literally said he didn't come to bring peace upon the earth. He came to bring division. It also says he came to bring a sword, which that's talking about the scriptures. What is that? Hebrews 4:12, the word of the Lord is quick and powerful and sharper than any two-edged sword. Right, so that sword's talking about the scriptures. But the point is that Christ said he didn't come to bring peace upon the earth. He came to bring division amongst people. He came to set people against each other. Excuse the background noise. It's always, everything's all hyper out here in Babylon. Yeah, grown-ass man walking these streets, dressed up and looking like a damn baby and shit. It's crazy what's going on out here. Grown-ass man walking down these streets in, dress outfits and shit. It's crazy. I see Eddie's here in the comment section. Yo, Eddie, after the stream, go restart it. Because I opened up with a response to your comment. Since you're tuning in late, you didn't get to see that. But to not waste time and just say the same thing over, I'm going to say go check that out after the stream. for an answer to what you said. He said, Judah said, "Shalom, brother." Yeah, how you doing, Judah? I hope you're doing okay, my friend. Yo, here's something weird I want to mention. Has anybody seen Jay around? Has anybody seen Sacramento Truth Movement anywhere? Oh, and by the way, for the record, since we've had that interaction about, Adolf and the Germans in World War II, like, what is that, like 3 or 4 weeks ago now? The dude has not contacted me at all, not one time, to set up a conversation about it, just to point it out. And, really, honestly, I don't really care. It's not something that I'm, interested in really debating, because there's really nothing to debate. There's really nothing to debate. It's obvious for any person who knows any history and, yeah, has any knowledge of world history at all, that Adolf and the Germans and, World War II, they were clearly in the wrong. I mean, I don't see how any logical person could sit there and try to argue otherwise. But if you want to sit there and believe that, then you're welcome to go believe that. If the knucklehead wants to sit there and believe Adolf and, buy all these German, artifacts to decorate his office and, drink out of a Swatsy cup, read between the lines, and you can go do that. If that's what you want to do, then you go do that. But, I'm not, I'm not down with that. I'm not, I'm not down with that. That's clearly in disagreement with the scriptures. I don't get how any person could claim they represent Christ, which again is what Jay says, claims that he believes in Christ, right? Claims to preach Christ. But then on the other hand, he like uplifts the Germans and Adolf. I mean, come on, dude, you can't do that. You can't claim you represent the Son of God and then also represent, a mass murderer. Like, sorry, dude, but you can't do that. And if you don't like that, then that's too bad. You're welcome to go believe that delusion if you choose. That's your choice. I can't sit here and tell you what to believe or what not to believe. But what I can do is criticize you for believing that. Let's see. The brother asked, Jesus said that what comes out of the mouth is what defiles a man, not that which he puts into it. Does that mean bacon is back on the menu? That's a really good question. And I've addressed this before, but I will address it once again. So let me pull up the verse here. Now, what should be mentioned is this can be found in two passages. You can find what Christ speaks about this in Matthew, the 5th chapter, and Mark, the 7th chapter. It's the exact same conversation. It's just accounted in two of the Gospels. So the verse in question, let me just find it real quick where it's at. Yeah, here it is. So the verse in question that the brother's asking a question about would be Matthew chapter 15 and verse 17. And I'm going to read down to verse 20. It says, this is red letter, Christ speaking. Do not yet ye understand that whatsoever entereth in at the mouth goes into the belly, and is cast out into the drought? But these things which proceed out of the mouth come forth from the heart, and they defile the man. For out of the heart proceeds evil thoughts, murders, adulteries, fornications, thefts, and false witnesses, and blasphemies. These are the things which defile a man, but to eat with unwashed hands defiles not a man. So the entire conversation here is not about people eating unclean meats and whatever food they want. The conversation is actually about the Pharisees asking Christ why his apostles eat bread without washing their hands. Just to prove that real quick, let's look up at verse 1 and 2. It says, Then came to Christ scribes and Pharisees which were of Jerusalem, saying, Why do your disciples transgress the tradition of the elders? For they wash not their hands when they eat bread. So the entire dialogue here is the Pharisees trying to criticize Christ, asking him why did his apostles eat food without washing their hands? So Christ goes in to explain that like the germs that are on your hands that enter into your body when you eat without washing your hands do not defile your body. Like, I'll give you an example. Earlier today, I was out and about. I didn't have access to a restroom to wash my hands, so I figured, you know what? Hey, I remember what Christ said, right? It's not that which enters the body that defiles you. So I ate my food without washing my hands, even though I was out, and working, doing shit today. You know what I'm saying? So there were germs on my hands, right? The doorknobs I've touched, the doors I've held, taking trash out, picking up a penny off the road, and so on and so forth. So there were germs on my hand that got onto the food I consumed and entered the body. But guess what? My immune system will fight it off. So to answer the question, this whole conversation here is not about eating whatever you want and about eating unclean meat. That's not the debate. That's not the conversation. The whole point of contention was the scribes asking Christ why the apostles don't wash their hands before they eat. So Christ responded and said that whatever enters in at the mouth goes in the belly and is cast out, and it doesn't defile the body. Now, an unlearned person will try to say, well, look, he said, whatsoever enters the mouth doesn't defile the man. So see, that's, shrimp, crab, and lobster. It's like, no. We got to keep in context of what is being talked about. And that's what a lot of people don't want to do, because the whole context of the discussion is not about eating whatever food you want. The context of the conversation is about eating food without washed hands. So Christ is saying that whatever germs are on your hands that get attached to the food you eat, they're not going to defile you. That's what he's talking about here. So no, pork, shrimp, crab, lobster, rabbit, right, crocodile, those things are not back on the menu. Right? That's definitely a lie and deception that people believe today. That's clearly not what Christ is talking about here. By reading in context, and this can be proven whether you read it here in Matthew 15 or whether you go to Mark the 7th chapter, it's the exact same conversation. It was funny. I recently seen a debate between Tazariak and some famous TikTok Muslim, and the Muslim tried to go here to this same chapter and look and say, well, Jesus made all foods clean, right? Jesus said that all foods are clean. It's like, no, he didn't say that all foods are clean. I mean, you're just, you're clearly not understanding what the hell you're reading. There's nowhere here that says that he made all foods clean. But that's not in the text. And then second of all, you remember what we talked about earlier is Christ said that he came to preach the law that God gave in the Old Testament. So guess what? What's part of that law is not eating certain animals. So that's what Christ was teaching. I mean, there's no way to get around this. But I hope that answers your question. Okay, bear with me a second. He said, my money change your comment was directed towards the dude you said was selling stuff on his channel. Yeah, talking about Perry Green. Hey, look, let me say this, right? I don't have a problem with people who make merchandise and sell it. Everybody has to make their own living. So, if some Christian sells cross necklaces or sells leather-bound Bibles on their page, I don't have a problem with that, and Christ wouldn't have an issue with that. Say if someone's selling a t-shirt, right, like a cross t-shirt, or a message of hope t-shirt, or trying to raise a fundraiser for people in need, there's nothing wrong with that. But what I do have a problem with, and what Christ would have a problem with, is what the merchandise says. Like Perry Green, for an example, right? Underwear he sells says it's not a sin for me, do whatever I want. Or he literally sells a t-shirt that has the Pornhub logo that has the word Bible in it. I mean, yeah, that's obviously an abomination right there. That's obviously wicked. So Christ absolutely would have a problem with what he's doing. But some, little TikToker that's selling crosses, necklaces or Bibles, that's not really a problem. Okay, let me see. Brother said being a germaphobe is actually bad for you. Like not eating peanuts as a kid, it messes you up. Yeah, yeah. Something to go along with that. Some people have like some disorder where they gotta, constantly wash their hands like every 5 minutes after, just touching like a damn fork or something. It's like, that's actually not good for your skin to constantly be washing it because it washes away like natural oils on your skin, or same thing with taking a shower, right? Most people believe that you should take a shower like every day or every other day. But that's actually not true. You should take a shower like maybe what, twice a week is more healthy for your body. Maybe even 3 days a week. Of course, depends on what your job is or whatever. But it's not good for your body to take a shower every single day because it actually, believe it or not, it can help dry out your skin because it takes away some of that natural oil that your skin produces if you're showering like every day. Just a fun scientific fact to throw out there. He asked, how much do you think the unclean animals is about? How they live? The shrimp, the sea bugs, lobsters, oysters, etc., are filters and bottom feeders, and pigs, while they're in their own filth, he was warning us of, let me see if he continued, warning us of contamination. Well, what I will say is that a lot of the creatures that are mentioned, it's has to do with like their how unsanitary they are, like the lobsters and crustaceans in the ocean, right? They're bottom feeders, right? They eat whatever falls to the sea floor, right? Or they eat the carcasses of dead animals. You're not supposed to be putting that in that body, right? Like putting that in your body, excuse me. And some of these creatures, keep that stuff within them, right? It gets, infects their meat. Now, I will say there's probably a handful of creatures on the list that might not physically harm your body if you consume them, but we're still not supposed to eat them because God declared us not to eat them. Like, I'll give an example, like rabbit, for example, right? We're not supposed to eat rabbits. Or let's say this, sometimes there's factories around the world that have rodents that are not they're not living outside, right? So they're not being contaminated. They're living indoors, right, in clean, relatively clean environments, and then they sell it for people to eat. Well, that would still be a sin to eat one of those, even though they might these particular ones might not have any real contamination to them. The point is, as God decided that these creatures are off limits to us to consume. So that's what I'd answer. Is a large amount of the creatures in Leviticus 11 um, are off limits because of the health hazards that they can cause to us, but some of them might not physically harm your body if you were to eat them. But we're not supposed to eat them because God told us we're not supposed to eat them. For whatever reason he decided for this or that creature, that's for God to know. That's not for me to know. Hey, look, I don't know the mind of God. Inside joke, I don't know the mind of God. So as to why he determined that you can't eat like certain birds or, rabbits or squirrels, I can't answer as to why God decided on that. But all I can say as a preacher of righteousness, as we as believers, we're not supposed to eat those things because God's word told us not to do it. So that would be my answer for you. Judah asks, what do you think about Isaiah chapter 4, verse 1? I don't think it's going to apply for every man due to prosecution, but sometimes um, rainbow pastors say this for all men of the truth. Yeah, I would say Isaiah 4:1. For those that don't know, it says, in that day 7 women shall take hold of one man. saying we shall eat our own bread and wear our own apparel. Yeah, I'd answer and say that that's talking about a lot of guys in the truth, but that's not everybody. I'd say there is clearly a context to take into consideration. So it's not saying that every single person is going to have seven women, but a lot of guys will. I mean, hell, you might have guys in the kingdom who might be content with having 2 wives. Meanwhile, the next man might want 20 wives. So it's different for each person. You know what? Something I want to address while I'm on the stream here. I got a fire at the ISUPK for a minute here. These guys teach that it's a sin for an Israelite to marry a woman of the other nations. Like, say, for instance, I was watching a discussion that Captain Tazariak was having with like some Christian. He was asking them, "What do you guys think about like interracial marriage?" Right? Like say a white American man with like a Filipino, for an example, right? Or a black man, which you guys perceive would be Israel, marrying a white woman. Like, what do you guys think about that? And he said, well, yeah, we would view that as sin. We're not supposed to be marrying a woman of other nations. Well, I'd have to disagree with him on that. One point I want to show here is let's go into the Old Testament here. Let's read about the law of war. Let's read about the law on war here. This is Deuteronomy chapter 21, verse 10. When thou goes forth to war against your enemies, and the Lord thy God has delivered them into your hands, and thou hast taken them captives, and seized among the captives a beautiful woman, and has a desire unto her, that thou wouldest have her to be your wife, then thou shalt bring her home to your house, and she shall shave her head, pare her nails, and she shall put off the raiment of her captivity, and shall remain in your house, and bewail her father and mother a full month. And after that thou shalt go in unto her, and be her husband, and she shall be your wife. So that right there alone proves that Israel can marry a woman of another nation. Now, what these guys will try to say is, well, when it says go into war against your enemies, like it actually means like say if there's a dispute between tribes of Israel, is basically how they would interpret it, right? So the enemy just means like another tribe of Israel. It's like, well, no. Well, first of all, at this time in history, Israel was one people, right? They were all one together. They weren't split up. That's the history on it. So you can't say that the enemy represents just another tribe of Israel that might be at odds with your tribe. You can't say that. But let's just read a little bit over this again. Verse 10, it says, when thou goes forth to war against your enemies, the Lord delivered them into your hands, and thou take them captive, and seize among the captives a beautiful woman, and has a desire unto her, that you would have her to be your wife. That will jump down a little bit to the latter part of verse 13. It says, and she shall put off the raiment of her captivity, and shall remain in your house, and bewail her father and mother a whole month, and thou shalt go unto her and be her husband, and she shall be your wife. So doesn't that prove that an Israelite can marry a woman of another nation off of this law of war that God gave to Israel? Think about that. Let's be illogical for a second. When it says when you go to war against your enemy, isn't that another nation, a foreign people? And it literally says that if you see a beautiful woman among the captives that you took from that nation and want her to be your wife, you can take her as your wife. So doesn't that literally the permission for an Israelite man to have a wife of another nation? I mean, that right there, that is an absolute mic drop moment. That is a mic drop moment just off that fact alone. That proves Israel can marry women of other nations. And another example I'll give you, which then I'll get back to the comments coming in. But is it not true that King Solomon had 700 wives of other heathen nations? So why did God not correct him on that? Like, let's look at this. 1 Kings 11, and we'll start at 1. It says, but when King Solomon love many strange women, together with the daughters of Pharaoh and the women of Moabites, Ammonites, Edomites, Zidonites, and Hittites, of the nations concerning the Lord, said to the children of Israel, You shall not go in unto them, neither shall they come unto you, for surely they will turn away your heart after their gods. Solomon chased unto these in love. Now, real quick, let me stop there because somebody's going to say, well, look, well, it says that God told us not to go unto them. It's like, well, hold up a second. Let's read context, though. The reason he said that was not that it would be a sin to marry the woman, but if you do, they could turn your heart away from the Lord. And that's what happened with King Solomon. Already had 300 concubines and 700 wives of the other heathen nations, and all those women eventually turned his heart away to follow after the gods of those nations. So that was the sin of Solomon. He believed and listened to what his wives said, and he followed other wicked gods. So the wives themselves were not the sin. They weren't the problem. It was the fact that if he gets involved with all these different women from these other nations, he might follow after the gods that their people are accustomed with. And that's what happened to him. Right, so that was the sin of Solomon. It wasn't that he had wives of other heathen nations. That's not the case. Let me see real quick. I'll read verse 3. It says, And he had 700 wives, princesses, and 300 concubines, and his wives turned away his heart. For it came to pass when Solomon was old, that his wives turned away his heart after other gods, and his heart was not perfect with the Lord his God, as was the heart of his father David. So, reading the context, we clearly see that Solomon's sin was that he followed after the gods of the other nations, which his wives did have a part to play in that. That's true. But the point is, the wives themselves were not his sin. Okay, because people try to use this and say, well, see, you can't have a wife of another nation. Well, no, that's clearly not correct, because if you read in context, Solomon's sin was he followed the other gods, not that he had 700 wives of other heathen nations. So that's just a fact check for Tazariak and the ISUPK and all these other groups that say that you can't have a wife of another nation. You are clearly wrong. And let me get this straight. So you guys are saying that in the kingdom, when we're going to be allowed to have, all these different wives, we're going to be able to afford to have different wives and children. You guys are saying you're not going to take a wife from another nation just because of their skin color? I mean, you serious? You serious? Like, what the hell are you talking about? You know what is funny? We'll go back to Isaiah 4:1 when it says that in that day 7 women will take hold of 1 man. So you guys are saying, oh, well, all those women have to be Israelites. All of them have to be Israelites. If a white woman came to you and wanted to be with you in that day, oh, you wouldn't accept her. Come on, man. Let's cut the bullshit. Okay, let me see here. As I said, if anybody has a question or comment, feel free to ask, because I don't know when I'm gonna get around to doing another live show. As I said, it's my situation is difficult. The way I have to do shit is half-ass. And it has to be that way, not because I want it to be that way, but that's just the way it is. You know what I'm saying? So I don't know when the next time I'll be able to do a live stream. So if anybody has a question or comment, this is your time to ask your question or comment, because it might be another week, might be another 2 weeks until I get on to do another live show. Just a heads up on that. Okay, let me check these comments. He said, if I'm remembering correctly, everyone's DNA has all the codes to create all character stats. Yeah, I'm not sure what you mean by that. Um, Well, let's look at this way. Let's look at this way. Like people try to ask, well, why did God hate Esau? Is it not true that Esau was the brother of Jacob, right? So they both had the same mother and father. And I'll respond and say, yeah, that is true, right? All people on earth were created by God. But guess what? That doesn't mean that God chose every nation. It doesn't mean God chose every people. Just like, for an example, everybody's a person on this earth, right? All humans are people, but their actions are different, right? Or their ways of life are different, even though they're all creations of God. I'll give another example. All creatures on earth, they're all created by God, but there's certain differences between those creatures. It's the same thing with humans, even though we all might look alike, right? All created by God, but that doesn't mean that God loves every person. That doesn't mean that God chose every nation as his own. Now, the Bible says, according to Deuteronomy chapter 28, let me pull that up real quick. This is real quick. This is Deuteronomy chapter 28, verse 1. It says, and it shall come to pass if thou hearken diligently unto the voice of the Lord your God, to observe and do all his commandments which I command you this day, that the Lord your God will set thee on high above all nations of the earth. Set thee on high above all the nations of the earth. So how could God love everybody equally the same if God told Israel that his will was to put them above all people of the earth? That's favoritism, right? The God of the Bible has favorites. And that's just a fact. If somebody doesn't like that, well, you're just being emotional. I'll give you another example. This is Deuteronomy chapter 7 and verse 14. It says, thou shalt be blessed above all people. There shall not be male or female barren among you or among your cattle. Let's read the top again. It says, thou shalt be blessed above all people. Right, so the point is that God chose Israel above all the other nations. Now, that doesn't mean that he didn't create the other nations. It doesn't mean that there wasn't a purpose for the other nations. There is. But the point is God has a chosen people that are above other nations. And that's not a arguable thing. This is just a fact. And for anybody saying that God loves everybody, everybody just all loving rainbows, hey, you're saying that modern church Christianity is what you're saying. To sit there and just believe that God's all love and kisses and rainbows. Like, you're not living in real life. The God of the Bible loves and he hates. That's what the Bible says. Hey, Romans 9:13. Jacob I loved, but Esau I hated. Now, how the hell does anybody get around that? And guess what? If you go back up to like verse 11, because people ask, well, why God hate Esau? Well, according to the text, if you read verse 11, matter of fact, I'll even pull it up. Give me a second. Just so somebody doesn't accuse me of misquoting the text, I will read it. It says, for the children being not yet born, neither having done any good thing or evil, that the purpose of God according to election might stand, not of works, but of him that calleth. It was said unto her, the elder shall serve the younger. As it is written, Jacob I loved, but Esau I have hated. Right? So the Bible's saying that God already decided this before the children were born. So as to what motive moved God to view Esau and his descendants that way, I don't know. The text just says that God decided this before he was born. I mean, you can't argue with what the text says. We just read it. And here's something that you also need to consider is God knows people before you're born. According to Jeremiah, 1:5, God told Jeremiah, I knew you before you were formed in the belly, and I ordained you to be a prophet to the nations. But did you catch that? God told Jeremiah that I knew you before you were even formed in the belly. Right? So God already knew him. God already knew his soul. And he ordained him or predestinated him to be a prophet to the people. Matter of fact, let me even pull something else up here. But bear with me for a second. Bear with me just 1 second here. Okay, this is a good one, dealing with the predestination and how we were chosen to be who we are before we were born. Because here's a fact that people don't want to acknowledge, is God already determines if you're a believer or not, whether you're going to be saved or not, whether you're going to live righteously or wickedly before you're born. It's already decided and predetermined. Now, we ourselves living in this physical world, we don't know that. Say for instance, we don't know what's going to happen next week, but God knows what's going to happen next week. We don't know what's going to happen in Iran over the next 2 months, but God already knows. We don't know what we're going to buy at the store tomorrow, but God already knows. We don't know what type of impulse purchase we're going to buy, but God already knows. This is the book of Ephesians, chapter 1 and verse 4. According as he have chosen us in him before the foundation of the world, that we should be holy and without blame before him in love, having predestinated us unto the adoption of children by Christ to himself, according to the good pleasure of his will. But did you catch that? He said we're chosen from the foundation of the world. Or actually it says before. It says before. Let me even read this again. Let's read it a little bit slower so we can comprehend what's being said here. Ephesians chapter 1 and verse 4. According as he hath chosen us in him before the foundation of the world, that we should be holy and without blame before him in love, having predestinated us according to the adoption of children by Christ to himself, according to the good pleasure of his will. Right, so doesn't that right there prove that we're predestinated before we're even born? Like, doesn't the text literally say that right there? Now, for all of the naysayers that are in disagreement, yeah, how you doing, Machine Lies? Yeah, go. You can check his channel out. I was over on his channel the other day having a discussion with that Mike character. And, before he came on, the other dudes on there were actually relatively respectful. But then Mike had to come on and and ruin the whole conversation, of course. Because he's a preschooler that can't behave himself. Dude's a 30-year-old man and has the table manners of a toddler. It really is sad and pathetic. Absolutely sad and pathetic. You know what I'm saying? Like, it's so dumb how people out here, act and treat each other. It really is just so bizarre. Like I'll give an example. Like, there was this podcast I tried to call in a couple times. I believe it was called the Podcast for the People, or People's Free Speech Podcast, something like that. And like, all these people are on there, yelling, screaming at each other. You try to join, you can't even get one word in. Everybody's yelling and hollering and screaming. It's like, wow, you'd think people could have, better manners than this. It's just really sad and pathetic. Just because they disagree about, if Trump is good or not, or disagree about, some new tax on something, everybody, acts up and, acts like a damn moron. It's truly pathetic and ridiculous. Let me see. He said character stats is a video game term used to counter the center bots. Same with random spawn point. For example, am I proud to be in a random spawn point by saying yes, you can't only be proud of the good things while ignoring the bad things? Well, I'll agree with the last statement that you said there. Matter of fact, let me see if I can find it real quick. Yeah, I agree with Little Baby. I agree with Little Baby. Right, that rapper. I buy these snacks sometimes at the store. They're called rap snacks. But look that up on Google if you don't know what I'm talking about. Rap snacks. And on the back of the package, they always have like some message from the rapper, right? Like some quote from him. And I was looking on the chip bag that a Little Baby had, and his quote on the back of the bag, they said, sometimes you need those bad days to help you appreciate the good ones. I was like, yeah, that's actually, he's right. He's damn right with what he's saying. Sometimes you have to have the bad days in order to appreciate the good ones. And, especially living in the end of times here, right? Living in the year 2026 AD, there's not many good days that come by. There's not at all and many good days that you'll encounter. Most days are just negative. And that's what it is. Let's see. This one guy said, I saw you on Jay Gee's channel yesterday. Yeah, I tried to join Jay Gee's podcast as well yesterday. And I did for maybe like 10 minutes. I saw that knucklehead William was there and some other clown. Um But there was nothing interesting going on over there. I thought maybe if I join, maybe we can spark up like some type of conversation. But they were just like they wanted to do like a review of like some guy talking about like some random topic. I was like, oh, okay. If you guys want to do that, I'll leave you to that. I'm not going to interrupt your planned stream, like your reaction video that you guys are doing to this guy's debate. You guys can go do that. I'll hop on some other time. So then I went to Machine's channel, right? Machine Lie's channel, and I had a discussion over there. So yeah, I did attempt to go on Jay Gee's channel the other day, but there was nothing interesting going on there, so I wasn't there for very long. Let's see. He said, I've had wrap snacks before. There was a flavor of chips that was awesome. I forget the flavor. Yeah, yeah. There's some good flavors they got. I know they have sour cream onion. Some type of like heat one, right? I don't know all the names off the top of the head, but there were some damn good ones, right? Some damn good ones, and they were only like $1.50 when I picked them up. For like the decent sized bag, right? Not too big, not too small, but decent. Yeah, so I get those sometimes whenever I'm at the place they have them. Okay, let me see real quick. One thing else I should talk about and mention is I seen that they're deploying a couple thousand more U.S. troops to the Middle East right now to aid in the conflict. So it's funny what the White House is telling you is a contradiction of itself. Trump will sit up there like 5 days ago and say, "Well, the war is winding down now. Right now, our our mission in Iran is starting to come to a close. Right, we accomplished what we wanted to do." And then 2 days ago, it comes out, "Oh, well, now 3,000 Marines are being sent to deploy in the Middle East." Oh, and Israel, right, on one hand, will say, "Yeah, we took out their leader. We accomplished what we want." But now they're starting to form a ground invasion into Lebanon over there. So they're just expanding the conflict even further. So just to demonstrate that you can't take what they're saying seriously. You can't believe the bullshit they tell you. You know what I find funny? There was a couple knuckleheads that was leaving a comment like this. One dude, Troy Taylor, was like, well, the U.S. Army's not lying about their casualty numbers. They're being serious. It's like, okay, so at the time they were saying they only lost like 8 guys and maybe like 15 guys injured over like, almost 3 weeks of the conflict. Like, you really believe that? But then Iran says, well, look, in these couple of strikes, we took out like 600 Americans. It's like, okay, well, let's be rational here. Let's just assume that both sides are, you know, not giving you the correct information. Let's say Iran's army, they're over exaggerating the numbers, but then the American army is underestimating the armors, or excuse me, numbers. Excuse my stutter. So perhaps it's safe to assume that it's somewhere within the middle, maybe a couple hundred. That's safe to assume based on all the information we have. It's funny. Like there was another knucklehead. I believe it was this 7 Day Adventist dude. Um, yeah, what is this guy's name? I believe it's like James or something, right? Like James or something like that. Like the 7 Day Adventist. Um, this guy was on the video asking me, well, what proof do I have that they're not lying about the numbers? And I tell the guy, well, next time before you leave a comment, perhaps you should watch the video, not just comment after you listen to 2 minutes, please. Because if you listen to the video, I gave multiple examples as to why the number is larger than what they're telling you. Like, I'll give you an example. Like the first couple days of this conflict, I said they lost 4 guys, or 3 or 4 guys. But actually, with the airplane example, it was 3 guys. I said 3 people were killed and they were flown back to the US. So in the video clip where they show the 3 guys that were brought back, there's four coffins there. And the camera's angled that you can't see back into the airplane. So there's likely like 3 more rows of troops back there. And then the same plane that has these coffins in it, if you look in the background, there's another plane coming down. The same exact plane to the military base. So why would it be such a leap of logic to assume that they're lying to you about the casualty numbers? They're telling you 3 servicemen died, but yet literally there's 4 coffins right there in front of your dumbass. Oh, but they're not lying to us though. They're not lying. I mean, come on, man. You got to be smarter than this. You got to be smarter than this, man. You know what I'm saying? Like some people just want to willingly be dumb and willingly be ignorant. And if you want to be dumb and ignorant, then you're welcome to be dumb and ignorant. Again, you can't feel bad for everybody. You can't feel bad for these ignorant people. That's just what it is. Like some of these dudes out here, wasting millions of dollars on gambling online. Like, sure, if you have a gambling addiction, of course, get help for that. No reason to have to live life with that, of course. But, it's hard to feel bad for some of these people that are wasting, hundreds of thousands of dollars to millions of dollars throughout their life, on these lottery or gambling games they play. It's like, dude, you should be a little bit, more smarter with your money. Hell, if you want to gamble $10, $20 here and there once in a while, sure. But, every single day you got to spend hundreds or thousands. I mean, have a little bit more control over what you're doing. It's hard to feel bad for some of these people because they get themselves into these effed up situations. Like I'll give an example. Like I watch this dude on YouTube. His YouTube channel is called Born Into a Corrupt System. I recommend checking his channel out. He's not really in the truth. He doesn't really know that stuff, but he knows that this whole system's, rigged and is a big scam. So there's a lot of decent videos talking about, it's not smart today to go get married and have children, right? It's not smart today to, overindulge in this society. Yeah, so my statement on that, I'd say, yeah, for most guys out here, it's better to be single, right? Not get married and not have children. And, somebody might say, well, that sounds weird coming from somebody who teaches polygamy. Well, let me answer that. The answer is, well, polygamy is moral and acceptable, but you have to have the funds to do that. And this is clearly found in the Bible. It would be a foolish thing to go get 3 wives and have children if you don't have money to take care of them. Hell, it would be foolish for a guy and girl to get together and have, say, 1 kid if they can barely even afford to feed themselves. So clearly there's reasoning that comes along with this. If there's a guy out there that has millions in the bank, guess what? He can afford to have 4 wives and 6 children. That man can afford to give them a decent lifestyle. So it's nothing wrong for that guy to go get, 3 or 4 wives if he chooses because he has the money to afford them. But meanwhile, the average, McDonald's worker out here, that can barely, buy himself a new pair of shoes every 4 years. It's probably best for him to have like one woman, if any at all. So yeah, it's just a wise thing today for most guys to remain single and not have a wife or children. And of course, not saying it's sinful to have a wife or children. It's certainly moral and good. But with that being said, you have to be smart as well. Most guys today don't have the money to have a wife and children. Shit, most dudes out here are struggling to feed themselves. Shit, you ever see how some of these dudes are living out here? Go on Reddit and look up male living spaces. Look that up. That'll give you something entertaining to do in your free time. Reddit Fred, male living spaces. And look at how some of these dudes are living on there. Dudes have them, sleeping on the damn floor, right? Sleeping on a damn, a dog bed. Sleeping on a damn water mattress on the floor. Shit, this one dude I seen literally has like a damn sleeping mat that he's sleeping on, and just has his TV on the box in the corner. And that's how he's living. And then these other guys are on there, oh, well, I just lost everything. My wife broke up with me, divorced my ass. And, she took the kids and all, my belongings. And I am, left on my balls with nothing. So a lot of guys, are just cautionary because there's a lot of these, stories of these dudes out here who had good relationships and then lost it all. And now they're stuck on child support. And, they have to be left, eating beans and rice for the rest of their, next couple years or whatever. Because they can't afford, to feed themselves after their child support payments, which they probably can't even see their child more than like once or twice a month anyway. You know what I'm saying? So a lot of guys don't want to get into such bullshit situations. You know what I'm saying? It's really understandable out here. Everybody out here seems to be, well, hell, I see like a lot of people ranting on YouTube about like the birth rates decline in the West. And really, it's very understandable as to why that's the case, because nobody wants to have children anymore. And that perfectly makes sense. Who the hell would want to have children when here it is, we're making like what, $9 an hour, some of us $12 an hour, and you can barely afford anything. Shit, a carton of strawberries is like $7.90. You know what I'm saying? Shit, a damn kid's Happy Meal is almost $9. You know what I'm saying? Who the hell can afford to live out here? And the government's like, well, we don't know why people like having kids. I see like all these videos from TikTok. I don't use TikTok, but people upload them on YouTube in like compilations, right? So I watch some of them, and all these women that are in, the late 20s or 30s are like, yeah, I'm never having kids. I'm never having kids. Or me and my partner, we agree that we're not having children. And it's very understandable as to why people are saying that. Who the hell can afford anything out here? And it doesn't make sense to bring kids into this effed up world. It doesn't make sense to bring another living being into this dumb and retarded world that we live in. Hey, save that for the kingdom. Because when the kingdom is established on earth, we're going to be reproducing. We're going to be having offspring. That's the time to be having wives and children, is in the kingdom. Now, today is not a wise idea unless you are financially stable to afford that. Like, I'll give you an example. Like 2 years ago, I went down to a beach here in Jersey, and I met this dude there that's a crypto millionaire, right? The dude literally showed me his, bank account. Dude's on there flexing, 20 million in the bank. Dude just spent, like $2 million on a condo next to the ocean. It's like, damn, I think to myself, damn, what a lucky guy. Dude's out here living that best life. Meanwhile, I'm over here, stretching $20 for the next 2 weeks. Damn, what a lucky dude. Wish I could, switch places with you. But anyway, that's besides the point. Um, Somebody like that, he can afford to have 5 wives. If he wants to go out and get 5 women, he can afford to do that. And if they have, let's say, 6 children, he can afford to pay for them. So a man like that, he can have multiple wives. But the average Wendy's worker out here, it's probably not smart for him to try to get 2 women because he can't afford it. He can't afford it. That's what it is. So let's see what's going on down here in the chat. I know I've been rambling for a couple minutes. Let's see. Yeah, that's a good statement. You said the truth is always the first casualty of war. Yeah, that's a really good statement because that's true. Of any conflict, both sides are not going to be giving the truth, right? Both sides are going to be lying about their numbers. Shit, like I'll give you an example. Like the Ukraine is saying, well, we've killed like 1 million Russians over the last 4 years, but they've only eliminated like 30,000 of us. Oh, really? Only 30,000? Only 30,000? Like, are you sure? Hey, somebody insert the John Cena meme, right? Are you sure about that? Right? Are you sure about that? I think that somebody is lying here. I think somebody is lying here. Obviously, they're not telling you the truth. And anybody that doesn't want to acknowledge that, you just don't know what's going on. Like I'm sorry, if you want to sit there like an ostrich with your head in the sand, then you're perfectly welcome to go do that. If you want to live at like an NPC, then you can go do that. Guess what? You don't have shit to say to us who are awoken and see the lies for how they are. Like, sorry, but you don't have shit to say. You don't have nothing to say. He said, yeah, how about all the money being made on betting on the war and insider trading? Yeah, it's sad. Yeah, I hear what you're saying, right? Guys are betting, on this or that happening. Yeah, I know what you're talking about. Yeah, so the great mouse utopia is what we are all experiencing. Yeah, everybody out here is just a blissful NPC, where everybody just repeats what they are told by the government, says, oh, well, America is such a free country. It's like, oh, really? Oh, really? America's like so free or so liberated? Well, knucklehead, you can't even leave the country without getting the government's permission and visa and passport to leave the country, right? You can't even leave without their permission. You can't even drive on these roads without their permission. If you do any offense, they can suspend your license until they see fit. They can take money from you and just call it tax. They can show up at your house and demand to search your home and just give you a piece of paper signed by some judge that you've never talked to before, doesn't know anything about you. And just because he wrote scribbles on pieces of paper, now the police can come harm you and your family. And if you dare to say anything, you will be beaten up. Oh, but that's a free country, folks. That is a free country. Like, no, that's bullshit. America, first of all, because, hey, look, I'm like one of the only people that has a pair of balls on the internet. There's a couple other guys out there, but really I'm like one of the few people that has a pair of balls to stand up and to say anything about this corruption. So I would say America is a authoritarian country. That's what I would condemn America as. America is not a nation of liberty and freedom. America is a authoritarian country, and Trump is a dictator. Really, all presidents are a dictator. But let's look how America is a authoritarian nation. Well, first of all, America is ran by a Congress, which is a group of, say, like, what, 300 guys and girls. well, old people, right? These guys are like typically in their late 40s to 60s, some even older. And all they can do is, throw a couple ideas back and forth. And if they come to an agreement on it, then they'll send it to the president. And if he signs it, now that legislation becomes the rules. And everybody has to abide and obey by that without question, or you will be hurt or charged money or thrown in prison. And they can make up anything they want. Like, say, for instance, they call them bills, right? Like a senator could come up with a bill, and pass it around to like the fellow senators in the Congress. And if it get enough votes on it, it will then ascend up to the president. And if he agrees upon the declaration and signs it, then that means that now that is the rules that everybody has to live by. Okay, so that is not freedom. That is oppression. That is a authoritarian country. There's a small group of people in charge who make all the rules up, and you obey them or you will be hurt or stolen from or killed. That is a authoritarian country. That's not freedom. Like, I'm sorry, but if you can't see that, and you are a brain dead sheep is what you are. To call America a nation of freedom and liberty, you are dumb. Like, I'm sorry, but these are the facts that are bitch slapping you across the face. These are the facts that are bitch slapping you across the face. And if you don't want to accept that, well, then you don't have to accept that. But this is the truth. Now, so I just can't stand these dumb people who sit there and say, oh, yeah, I'm like so free and liberated in America. It's like, okay, well, is your dumbass working 9 to 5 every other day for the next like 60 years of your life? Oh, yeah, whatever, though. I'm free, but I get, SNAP benefits. So, oh, really? So you're free, right? You're like so free and liberated. I mean, come on, what are you talking about? Huh, you know, eh, so free and liberated in America. Like, no, you're a brain dead child, is what you are. It's ridiculous how dumb people think out here, and is a brainwashed nation. Let's see. He said, if voting makes a difference, they wouldn't let you do it. By the Samuel Claims character. Yeah, that's a good statement, because voting is all a scam, right? It's all just a scam. The people who run America are chosen by the powers behind the scenes. They just put on this show, this act for you gullible sheep, so you can feel like you played a part in the selection process. But realistically, what is stopping them from saying, like, let's say for an example, if one candidate was winning by the vote count, what's stopping them from just putting like 2 million more votes to the other person to boost them over the person who was previously winning? Like, you're telling me they can't do that? Like who the hell's stopping them from doing that? And how would you ever find out? You know what I'm saying? Like, people are just so naive out here as they think that they are being told the truth, right? They're not lying to us about anything. Nothing's being covered up, right? They're just giving us the numbers, right? They're just telling us what it is, and we believe them. It's like, okay, so you don't think that people that have a position of power over other people are not going to lie to their subjects to gain power and control over them? Like, seriously, think about that. I'll give you another example of how they're controlling this population. Like these grown dudes out here that are 15, 16, 17, where some of them are 6 feet tall, or some of them have, grown facial hair. And the government tells them, you're not yet a man, right? You are a boy. You're not yet a man. Say, okay, well, they are men. First of all, they can produce children. They're like 6 foot tall. They can impregnate women. They sound like men. How are they not, though? Just because some politicians wrote scribbles on pieces of paper and called it the rules? Like, that doesn't make sense. That's not reality. Like, say, for instance, um, let's just say, for example, if some politician lost a loved one due to a heart attack or stroke, if they come up with some legislation that says, well, people under 80 cannot die from heart attacks or strokes, and they sign that into law, it's like, okay, that doesn't have any effect on biology and heart issues. Like, just because you claim that is now the rules, that doesn't now change human anatomy or biology or health issues. Like, I'm sorry, but that doesn't change that. Or guess what? I'll give you another example. If the government says, well, guess what? Now gender is legality, right? Somebody can legally change their gender to whatever they choose. Like, okay, that doesn't have any effect in reality. Just because the government says a guy can change his gender to a female, that doesn't mean that he's now female. Like, that's biologically not true. Like, sorry, but that is just true. The government could sit there and lie and make up whatever they want, but you cannot change these facts. And it's just the truth. Anyone that doesn't want to accept that, you're just a brainwashed zombie. Again, I think most Americans are a bunch of gullible ass kissers, is what I call most Americans, right? Like, say, for example, most Americans are prideful for no reason. Americans, like, look at this, for example. This is how most dumb people in America think. On one hand, they say, well, I am a law-abiding citizen. But on the other hand, they'll also say, well, I am so free and liberated. Hold up a second. How the hell can you be so free and liberated if you just admitted that you're a novice who obeys whatever you're told by people in charge over you? Like a blissful slave. Like, what makes you different from the Germans during World War II? Guess what? All those Germans in those trenches that fought you Americans and Britons and whatever, all those dudes in there, they did that because they just followed what the government told them to do. It's not that they personally had an issue or problem with you. They just did that because that's what they were told to do. And all you American soldiers, you went and did it because that's what you were told to do. Not that you had any personal problem with, a person living in Germany yourself, but you guys did that because you were forced to go do that. But y'all could have got together and said, no, what, we're not going to do that. We're not going to obey what this corrupt government tells us we're going to do. Like, I'll give you another example. Let's go to modern day for an example, right? You see all these people, losing their minds and crying and having rants on like TikTok over this new military draft that's going to happen. It's like, okay, like somebody sent me an article the other day. I want to make mention of this. There was an article that was sent to me and I checked out. So they were saying, hey, look, well, Congress has now agreed that starting in December, right, in December of 2026, now every individual in America, right, all males from like 18 to 30, now we're automatically registered into our automatic draft registration. Say, okay, well, first of all, that proves America's an authoritarian dictatorship because what they are saying is, hey, look, we automatically decided that all of you have to go do what we say, no questions asked. And any of you who dare to challenge and disagree with our demand, you will be punished. You will either serve jail time, you might get killed, you might get, all your belongings stolen from. We'll charge you a huge sum of money. And all these people just believe it, right? All these people just believe it and go along with it. Well, if all of you guys, instead of crying like a bitch on TikTok, if you got together and told the government you're not going to do what they say, then guess what? They have no power over you. If all you people gathered in mass, well, when I say in mass, I'm not talking about the church, inside joke, but if all of you gather together, right, in mass numbers, you could make a difference. Because guess what? The people in charge are afraid of people rising up against them. That's why they're trying to do all these things to keep you all brainwashed and occupied. Right? Most guys out here are occupied with like this GTA bullshit, right? Oh, GTA 6, right? Waiting for that to drop. And that's where they're going to be spending their free time on. Not paying attention to this dumb shit that the government's making up and forcing upon them. Like, hey, look what happened with January, what was it, January the 4th or January 6th? With that riot that happened over here in America. Hey, they were scared, right? The Congress was scared because people were pissed off and they were actually coming after them. But then their police force got involved and he tried to get the situation under control, which ended pretty badly for them because I hear a lot of them got injured, which is well deserved, by the way, because they are police officers are not a force of good. They are a force of evil. They work for the devil. Like, let me inform you, let me educate you in case you were unaware. When an officer joins the force of any nation, they have to take a vow to uplift that nation's constitution and her laws. They take a vow to obey and abide by that, right? And to enforce it. So they take a vow to the enemy. They take a vow to the devil. They take a vow to do evil, is what officers of any nation and country do. So yeah, I'll say this statement: an officer cannot be saved. A police officer cannot be saved. Now they could repent and leave the force, and then now salvation can be available for them, but not while you are on the force, not while you're actively on this devil's military or servicemen, right, or police force, whatever term you want to put upon it. You cannot be saved and actively work for this devil. I'm sorry, you can't be. That's just a fact. Hey, the Bible says you can only serve one God. You can only serve one master. You'll love the one and you'll hate the other. So how can people sit there and say, oh, well, I'll serve the government and I'll serve God? It's like, no, sorry, you can't do that. You can only serve one. You either serve this authoritarian government or you serve God. There is no in between. No, and that's just reality. That's a reality check. I'm going to go for like 10 more minutes. I'll round this stream up at like 2 hours here. If anybody has any question or comment, this is the time to get it in now in these last 10 minutes. Because as I said, I don't know when I'm going to be doing another live show here. So this is your time to get your question addressed. But yeah, man, it's just ridiculous and just so bizarre to me how dumb everybody is out here. Like everybody's, just believing whatever they're told by the government. It's like, so you really don't think that the government's lying to you, or they're not trying to hide something from you, or they're not trying to control you? Like seriously, think about that. I just don't get how people can't see this out here. I just honestly can't get how people are so brainwashed out here in this nation and society. It really is just sad and blindly pathetic. Oh, but we're like so liberated and free. How the hell are we so liberated and free? Like seriously, how the hell are we so liberated and free if we gotta go bust our balls working a 9 to 5 for the next 60 years? Oh, but since we can retire at 80 for like 5 years before we die, oh, we're like so free. I mean, shit, people are not even being able to retire out here. Like I saw that the other day at Walmart. There was a bagger that's like 90 years old and she's still out there bagging groceries. It's like shit, shouldn't you be like a half a foot in a grave at this point? Shouldn't your ass be, nearly dead? Not to be disrespectful, but I mean, seriously, at 90 years old, you could die any day now. And here, this is how you're spending your life. You're here stocking groceries and bagging a customer's goods. Like, whatever happened to your retirement? Again, it shows how unfair and how unnatural this life that we're living out here. Now, we're not supposed to be working as hard as we are out here. Not supposed to have to work 3 damn jobs to barely afford a place to live and to feed ourselves. That's slavery. That's not freedom. And again, I'm one of the only few people that has a pair of balls to stand up and to condemn America as a authoritarian country. Yeah, and look, anybody who disagrees, you just don't know what's going on. I mean, I'm sorry, but the truth is the truth. If you don't like the truth, then you don't have to accept the truth if you don't want to. But the truth is the truth. Let me check these comments real quick. Said, have you heard of the Christmas truce of World War One? Great stuff until it was no more. Yes, I know what you're talking about. That for Christmas Day, they came to a truce between the soldiers on each side, where they actually came together, played games and drank and partied for a day. And then the next day, they went back into the trenches and killed each other. A true story, right? True story. Look that up if anybody don't know what we're talking about. But yeah, I know what you're saying. But again, it shows how dumb it is, right? So they're, all buddies for one day, but then literally, a couple hours later, right, the next day, they are now all enemies again. It's laughable. But yeah, man, it's evident that this place is on her way out, right? It's evident that America, which is that great city Babylon that the Bible prophesies about, she is in her decline, right? That's why she's lashing out at all these nations. Like, look what happened in Venezuela recently, right? They flew over there, captured their dictator because he was saying shit on Twitter that Donald Trump found offensive. So they literally flew over there, um, kidnapped him, and flew him back to America, and now put him into jail for however long time. It's like, well, first of all, what other nation can do that? What other nation can issue demand backed by force and violence? And you obey, or you will be captured and you will be hurt. You will be killed. What other nation can do that other than America? Like, say, for instance, America tells China, hey, look, you better not move on Taiwan. You better not invade Taiwan because we'll be right there to defend Taiwan against you. And we'll arm them. Look what's going on in Ukraine, right? Russia is telling these nations not to get involved, but they're sending, trillions of dollars, or at least hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of billions of dollars over the last couple of years, of weaponry to defend Ukraine, right? Because, the truth is this, right? The only reason that Ukraine still exists as a sovereign, independent nation today is because of the armory that they are receiving from America and NATO. If it wasn't for that, they would have fell within like 2 weeks. Because they are a weak nation. Like, sorry, but that's just true. Somebody don't like that. That's just true. Ukraine has nothing on Russia. Russia is the world's second most advanced military, behind the United States. And the third would be China. But the point is this. America is stretching itself thin, like what happened with the Roman Empire, right? They're stretching their territory beyond what they can contain. Like, America has military bases all over the world. They have 800 plus military bases around the entire world that are set up in these nations around the world. So it begs the question again, what other nation has 800 military encampments around the world? Though that can only be said about America. There are no other nations, not China, not Russia, not India, not Pakistan, so on and so forth. None of them have these military encampments all over the world that they base troops at to have some type of control over all these different environments and land areas on Earth. That's only America, right? So when the Bible says, what is that, Revelation chapter 17, verse 18, a woman you saw is the great city who rules over the kings of the earth. Yeah, well, that's talking about America. That's talking about America. What other nation rules over the kings and presidents of the earth? To the extent that the United States says, I would argue that there is no other person. Well, not person, no other country, excuse me. There is no other country that fits that category. Let's jump up here. This is Revelation 17 and verse 5. It says, and upon her forehead was a name written, Mystery, Babylon the Great, the mother of harlots and abominations of the earth. Right, Mystery Babylon the Great, the mother of harlots and the abominations of the earth. I'd say this is talking about the United States here. America pushes abomination upon the earth, right, and whoredom and wickedness. I'll give you an example. a woman's liberation has been pushed upon all these nations on the world, or at least the vast majority of them, by America, right? Saying, look, a woman shouldn't have to, be covered up in public. They should be able to dress up however they please. If they want to walk around with a bikini on, they're allowed to do that. And all of you nations that try to keep your woman modest, you are oppressive, or you are oppressive. You need to change your ways to line with our American values and standards. I'll give another example. They push, love is love, right? If you want to be a man and marry another man, you can go do that. And that's what America stands for. And all these other nations are following after that because America made it cool, right? America made it cool to be with the same gender, right? That came from American philosophy. I mean, of course, people were doing this all throughout history, but the nation today in the 21st century who is pushing this moral or so-called morals on the world is mostly America. Like, I'll give an example. Look what's going on over in like the Philippines or Thailand, for example. You have something over there called lady boys, which are these dudes who dress up like women, right? Dress their hair like women, might even undergo surgery to enlarge their breast so they can be like women, and try to attract the guys. And it's ridiculous, but that notion came down from America. That notion that was morally acceptable and okay came down from the States. So that's why the Bible's calling her, right, Mystery Babylon the Great, the mother of all harlots and the abominations of the earth. That's America. That can't be said about the Vatican and the Roman Catholic Church. Like, I'm sorry, but that's not what it is. Well, first of all, if you talk to like most Catholics, they tell you, well, yeah, we're not with rainbow marriage. Some of them will say it's okay. Like, oh, well, the morals change. Maybe in the Old Testament it wasn't okay, but now it is today. But some of them will say, yeah, we're open and accepting. We're all about moving humanity forward. We're beyond the times today, of criticizing or demonizing people for their sexuality. We're beyond that today. That was something from old times. Or I'll give you another example of how she spread her infectious ways upon the earth, right? Where they want women to be, like workers. They want women to have careers, push off marrying and having children way later in life. You have women out here who are in their late 30s and 40s now trying to settle down, right? Now trying to, find a partner and have children, right? That's now what people are doing out here. Where in times past, that wasn't the case. But that's now the notion that they want to push upon the people, work hard to try to build a relationship, or not a relationship, a career path for yourself when you're younger. And then when you get old, then you have children and settle down with one guy, even though by the time you're in your late 30s, you've already been with like at least 5 or 6 other guys, or, or people in general. But that's what the culture teaches. That's what American ways are upon the earth. So let me say it again. This is such a good indicator. This is talking about America. This is not talking about the Roman Catholic Church. It's not talking about Italy. Not talking about Rome, which, by the way, the Vatican has the world record for being the smallest nation in the world, the smallest country in the world. Look that up. That is a fact. That is a fact that the Vatican City holds the world record for being the world's smallest independent nation. So let me read this again. Yes, read it one more time. Just one more time. It says, upon her forehead was a name written, Mystery Babylon the Great, the mother of harlots and the abominations of the earth. So my question, and my challenge to anybody who dares to disagree with what I am saying is, who is that talking about? Who is that talking about today? Right? Who is John showing in this prophetic vision? the nation that rules over the earth, that all nations bow to, the nation who makes all the earth's merchants rich off of importing her merchandise by sea, by ships. Who is that talking about? If it's not America, that is my question and my challenge to any person, any scholar, any pastor, any person who calls themselves spiritual. That is my question to you. Anybody who dares to challenge what we are saying about these prophetic scriptures, the burden of proof is upon you to demonstrate what this is talking about. Let me give you another bonus proof that this is talking about America. Let's look at verse 1. It says, "And there came one of the seven angels, which had the seven vials, and he talked with me, and said, Come hither, I will show you the judgment of the great whore who sits upon many waters." Now, first of all, America does physically dwell upon many waters, but she's surrounded by ocean. That's how ships transport the goods, say from Africa or Asia, right, or Europe, over to America. But here's the thing that most people don't know is there's actually a double meaning here with these waters. Yes, she is physically by water with her deep seaports, but here's a second meaning. Look at verse 15. It says, "And he said unto me, the water where you saw, where the whore sits, represent people in multitudes and nations and tongues." Right, so the water, on one hand, is physical water, but it has a double meaning. It represents massive multitudes of diverse people and tongues and nations and languages. First of all, the word Babylon means confusion, and it comes from the story of the Tower of Babel that you read about in Genesis, the 11th chapter, where God confused the language of the people so they couldn't continue to build the tall tower they were constructing. So God confused their languages so they could not understand one another. That's where the word Babel or Babylon comes from. Okay? So now today, Babylon, which is America, it represents confusion. And that's what all that America promotes and pushes upon the people of the world is confusion and abomination and filthiness. Right? Remember, America's ways are, hey, look, live how you live. Don't criticize other people for their sexualities or for their ways of life. Live how you want. You can live however you see fit. You can do whatever you want. Eat whatever foods and luxuries that you want. Spend money on whatever. Anything you want. That's the message. Oh yeah. So one thing I wanted to mention was with verse 15. I'll read it one more time. It says, "He said unto me, the water where you saw where the horse sits represent peoples and multitudes and nations and tongues." Well, yeah, that's what you have out here in America. There's people here from every walk of life, right? From every nation on earth, from every lifestyle, from every religion. Every way of life in general can be found all here mixed together as one in America. Like, let me give you an example. Like, literally, I have seen streets out here where you have a Muslim mosque, you have a Catholic church, and a satanic temple of Satan, right? Or some Mormon temple down the road, some Freemasonic lodge, literally on the same damn street. And then let's talk about this as well. Say if I go down to the strip mall up the road, guess what? I can find Chinese food. I can find Italian food. I can find Mexican food. I can find some Asian Philippines dishes. You can find all types of delicacies from all over the world over here. And guess what? The people who own those shops, more often than not, like 90% of the time, are people who traveled from those countries and set up shop here in America and sell the food that they made back in their home country. Like some guys will come over from the Philippines or from Kazakhstan and set up a shop over here in America and sell the pastries that they would make back home. And Americans buy it because it gives them a taste of, food and different culture from around the world. right? So that's one example of how this place is a big melting pot. Look that up on Google. America, the Great Melting Pot is what they refer to this place as, right? Because it's all diversity, right? You can find everything and anything here. You know, you can find Africans here. You can find Chinese people here. You can find people from the Middle East here. You can find Russians here. You can find Brazilians here. You can find Mexicans living here. You can find Canadians here. You can find Germans here. You know, and I can keep naming countries or nations, but the point still reigns supreme. And this place is confusion, right? Everything goes here. Everything that you want to do evil, you are allowed to do here. I mean, there's some states over here where you can lay with animals, and that's morally okay. But you better not get with a girl that's 2 years under 18, though. Oh, because you're weird, though. That even though she's, you know, physically developed and mature and can have children, oh, but she's not yet a woman, though. So that's not morally okay, but it is okay for you to go lay down with a goat, though. That's how this dumb nation America thinks. That's how this nation thinks. And guess what? God doesn't have God's not okay with that. That's why he had John write this down in the book of Revelation as a warning to those who come after it. There's a judgment coming. There's a judgment day coming where Babylon, not only Babylon, but the entire world's going to be judged. You know, and it serves as a warning. You know, it serves as a warning of these things that are coming in the near future. And that's what we're on here warning people. We're warning people, unlike these pathetic, brain dead preachers on here like Perry Green or the Layman Seminary. And, you know, they're minions who flock to those channels. You know, they're telling you live in sin, you know, do whatever you want. Jesus paid for everything for you to party your life away. But we're telling people, no, you got to repent of your evil. You got to obey God's laws and commandments and believe on Christ. And if you don't do that, then you're not going to be exempt from that coming judgment. You're going to be caught up in it if you're not living in accordance with what the scriptures teach. You know, that's what we're on here telling people. Let me see real quick. Yo, how you doing, Alfred? Glad to see you here, my friend. He said this whole world is cursed. IETT. Yeah, that is true. The whole world is under a curse. Right? The whole world is well, first of all, the Bible says, what is that? What's that scripture? Is I believe it's Job 9:24. It says, "For the earth was given into the hands of the wicked." Right? The earth was given into the hands of the wicked. So the people who rule the earth right now are evil. I'll give a bonus verse, Proverbs chapter 29, verse 2. When the righteous are in authority, the people rejoice. But when the wicked bear rule, the people mourn. Well, look, everybody's mourning. Everybody's sad everywhere. Everybody is depressed everywhere. Everybody is suffering, right? People are skipping meals, right? Children are going to bed hungry. People are living out under bridges, all because of this dumb, corrupt government that rules over these lands. Meanwhile, their politicians are buying their fifth yacht and, you know, eighth supercar, you know, have 300 million in the bank. But everyone else is left to suffer. That's evil. That's wicked. And that's a sign of a declining empire, which is what America is. She's in her state of decline. You know, and that's what the Bible says. Right? She's in the state of her rapid decline. That's the time we're living through right now. Okay, bear with me 1 second. This is the book of Jeremiah, chapter 50, verse 23. How is the hammer of the whole earth cut asunder and broken? How has Babylon become a desolation among the nations? Right, and that hasn't happened yet, but we're starting to see that. The nations around the world are starting to turn on America and starting to, you know, ban their citizens from traveling to America or banning Americans from moving to their nation because now they're starting to see America's corruption and double standards, and now they're trying to separate themselves from her ways. Yeah, Judah said Babylon has fooled everyone with fake luxury. Yeah, everybody out here is being fooled, well, many different ways than one. Like, look at all these people out here, buying just useless junk and garbage. Like, did you know? Here's a fun fact for you. Did you know that the average American household has 300,000 items in it? And that's counting everything, like every silverware in the drawer, every plate, every dime and nickel, every a marker and pen, but everything in general typically adds up to 300,000 different items in a regular American household. That's a fun fact in case you didn't know that. Everybody's out here, buying all this dumb shit online from Temu, right? TikTok shop. Everybody's overindulging in dumb shit. But hey, that goes back to the scriptures. Remember that she made all the merchants of the earth rich off of importing their merchandise. And that's why these merchant men are going to be weeping and wailing when they see the smoke of her burning, like it says in Revelation. Bear with me a second. Look at this, Revelation chapter 18 and verse 15. The merchants of these things which are made rich by her will stand afar off for the fear of her torment, weeping and wailing. For in 1 hour so great riches as came to naught, and every shipmaster and all the company and ships and sailors and as many who traded by the sea, they stood afar off and they cried when they saw the smoke of her burning, and saying, what city can be compared unto that great city? It says, and they cast dust on their heads and cried, weeping and wailing, saying, alas, alas, the great city, where we were made rich, all who had ships in the sea by reason of her costliness. For in 1 hour was she made desolate. Rejoice over her, thou heaven, and you holy apostles and prophets, because God have avenged you upon her. Right, so these merchant men are going to be weeping and wailing over Babylon when she falls, because that's how they were made rich, off of manufacturing their products for cheap, shipping it over the seas, and becoming rich off of selling to the consumer, which is the average American. There was some dumb knucklehead who tried to say, like in verse 19, when it says, oh, well, they cast dust on their heads and cried, oh, well, that's a Middle Eastern custom. So this is actually talking about Saudi Arabia, is what some dumb knucklehead simp in the comment section was trying to say. It's like, dummy, Mecca is not Babylon. Mecca doesn't fit any of the classifications. Nobody's becoming rich off of, going to Mecca and circling the Kaaba. Like, I'm sorry, but that's not reality. They ain't selling merchandise over there. And if it's any at all, it's very minimal. So again, just an example of how not everybody is fit to be teaching the word of the Lord. There's a lot of dumb and naive people on the internet today. Okay, so I am going to begin to wrap this live stream up here. I did go like 20 minutes, roughly 20 minutes over what I said I would do. But what I want to do here is let's end this on a positive note. Just 1 second. By the way, if anybody made it to the end of this live stream, put hashtag crazy, right? I see Luke's tunes in. How you doing, my guy, Luke? I believe I said something to Luke earlier in the stream, if the memory serves me correctly. But hashtag crazy if anybody made it to the end of the video. We'll give him a little shout out here, as he said in the comment. Yeah, there was something else I wanted to say. Oh yeah, but in conclusion, from everything talked about tonight, what we talked about how free grace and antinomianism is a lie and a deception that we are to expose as being clearly delusional and ignorant. And the people who believe those things, they better get their facts straight. They better get their facts straight, because they're leading people and themselves down a dark path that is not going to save them in the end. We talked about how Christ called to keep the law, right, and have righteous works. We talked about, the coming judgment upon the world and Babylon. So I want to end this live stream off with reading the last page of the Bible. Well, not the entire thing, but a handful of precepts from the chapter. Remember, this is the last page of the Bible here. This is the book of Revelation, chapter 22. Go to verse 10. It says, "And he said unto me, Seal not the sayings of the prophecy of this book, for the time truly is at hand. He that is unjust, let him be unjust still. He that is filthy, let him be filthy still. And he that is righteous, let him be righteous still. And he that is holy, let him be holy still. And behold, I come quickly, and my reward is with me, to give every man according to his works." That I'm Alpha Omega, beginning and the end, the first and the last. Blessed are they who do his commandments, that they may have the right to the tree of life, and may enter in through the gates into the city. For without are dogs and sorcerers, and whoremongers, and murderers, and idolaters, and whosoever loves and makes a lie. I, Christ, have sent my angel to testify unto you these things in the churches. I'm the root and the offspring of David, the bright and the morning star. And the Spirit and the bride say, Come. And let him that heareth say, Come. And let him that is the first come. And whosoever will, let him take the water of life freely. For I testify unto every man that hears the words of the prophecy of this book. If any man should add unto these things, God will add unto him the plagues that are written in this book. And if any man shall take away from the words of the book of this prophecy, God will take away his part out of the book of life, and out of the holy city, and from the things which are written within this book. Right, so the Bible, in its very last page, before the entire book ends, it gives us a warning, gives these people a warning that are sitting online lying upon the word of God and teaching people deception. And this would correlate with these antinomians like Perry Green and the layman seminary Jackass 77, Praise I Am, that knucklehead clown. And all these other liars and deceivers on the internet who are telling you, you don't have to live by God's laws and commandments today. That was all done away with. Just say a couple words on some Sunday and believe in Jesus and you're saved forever. And that's just not true. That is a lie. And if somebody wants to willingly believe a lie, then you are welcome to go believe a lie. But that's not going to save you in the end. We just read that nobody who makes a lie, no whoremongers, no adulterers, no thieves, no liars, etc., are going to inherit the kingdom of God. So anybody teaching you that you can go and live those lifestyles, they are telling you a lie. And if you have any smarts to you, then you would know that you can't follow those people, and that we are to expose them and to tell people to avoid these deceivers. One last verse I'll throw up here before I end the stream out. This is the book of 1 Corinthians 6, verse 9. Know ye not that the unrighteous will not inherit the kingdom of God? Be not deceived. Neither fornicators, nor idolaters, nor adulterers, nor effeminate, or abusers of themselves with mankind, nor thieves, nor covetous, nor drunkards, nor revilers, or extortioners shall inherit the kingdom of God. And such were some of you, but you are washed and you are sanctified, and you are justified in the name of Christ, and by the Spirit of God. All right, so just one more example that shows that we're not supposed to be living those ways. It said you have to know that none of these people who are living these wicked lifestyles are going to inherit God's kingdom. So anybody that sits there and tells you you can live those ways, just be a Christian when you do it, they're telling you a lie and a deception. So we are to expose these people and to tell the people who are truly seeking the truth to avoid these deceivers. That's our job as teachers of Christ, right? Teachers of truth. We are to expose these liars as frauds and deceivers. But anyway, I'm going to wrap the stream up there. And if anybody made it to the end, hashtag crazy in the comments. If there's any questions or comments, you can add them down in the comment section. I will address those. But till next time, everybody.